Hey there, my name is Matt Hamlin. I'm a longtime software developer who's worked on a number of platforms in a variety of environments. On the Mac, we spend so much time in the Finder. It's how we navigate and organize our files and projects. This is how I set it up to get the most insight into what's going on. Most apps will have their settings available with this command. Command, comma, or if you go up to the application menu, there'll be a settings option. And in here, there are a few things I would tweak straight out of the gate. First things first, I would go to advanced and I would make sure I show all file name extensions. By default, it hides them for you. I'd prefer to just see all the extensions on all the files. I'm going to turn off the warning to let me know when I'm changing the extension on a file name. I know what I'm doing. I'm sure you do as well. We don't need that extra safety. iCloud Drive I'll leave, and then I'll leave on the warning before emptying the bin just to show you what that looks like a bit later. We also have this thing called the sidebar. Now, I don't have any Finder windows open yet. We're going to take a look at those in just a second. But there are lots of things that we can add to the sidebar just so we can access them quickly and easily. In fact, we can add our own custom folders in there. Over in general, I'm also going to change this behavior because right now if I tap on the Finder down in the dock, it's going to bring up a new window and it's going to show me all my recent files. I rarely use this. I'm usually happier to start in my home directory. So I'm going to close that with that. And so now when I open a new Finder window, we're going to see that it opens in my home directory. I can still go find recents by tapping on recents in the sidebar. And I can see all the latest files I've worked with here. I can create multiple windows. I can create tabs in the Finder window as well with Command T. So loads of ways to navigate around the system. A couple other quick things I usually configure because we've turned on file extensions. So if I look in my documents folder, now I'll see I've got PDFs, I've got text files. If I go up to view, I can change a few other settings as well. I want to show the path bar. And then I also want to show the status bar. So this shows me where I am in the directory structure. This also gives me an idea of how much space I have left on disk, how many items are in the folder. It's kind of handy. So this is how we interact with all the files on the file system. To see even more detail, because the Mac does try to hide a certain level of complexity from you. If we hold down the Alt key when we're looking in here, we'll get different options. So if I look at Go, we can see that the library option has been added. So if I hold down Alt and click on any of these menus, or if I hold it down after I've clicked on the menu, then I'll be able to go to my library folder. Most users are not playing with that. Of course, as developers, there's a good chance that you're diving in and maybe playing with some settings or something. So you can see I'm in my library folder there. If I also look in view options, in addition to the settings, there's another settings for Finder. I can have my Finder windows always open in column view. And I can change the size of the fonts and everything. I'm going to leave it in column view. I use that a lot. And there are basically three. There are four, but there are basically three that I use most for getting around the Finder. Different ways of looking at the files, and they're up here. So there's the icons, there's a list, and then there's a column view. There's a gallery view as well. Again, I don't really use it that much. If you want to switch between those quickly, when you have a Finder window open in front of you, if you hold Command 1, it switches to icon view. 2 is for list. 3 is for column view. Now 2 is kind of handy because you can see things like date modified, size, kind. So there are lots of different ways that you can sort your files. And in fact, you can add other properties that you want to be able to sort on in the list. So this one might be a useful one for you. I personally like the column view best. That's what I spend most of my time in, if I'm in the Finder at all. And you can navigate up and down with the arrow keys. So it makes it kind of easy. Now, the other thing that we have is, so I'm in my home directory here. In fact, I'm going to close that tab. On Unix, of course, we have hidden files. Those are the ones that are preceded by a dot. So I can show those by holding down Command-Shift period. And I can see I've got a .swift PM file for a bit of Swift development I was doing, a .vs code folder as well. And when I unhide those, I can then navigate into them. So now we're starting to uncover some of the things that are hidden by default that as a developer you might want to access. So that's kind of getting a view of the file system. If we want to delete files, more often than not, I'm not going to delete any of those, of course. I'm going to go to Documents. I don't need this crash sample anymore. I can drag this down to the trash in the dock there, and dragging it down to the trash. If I hit undo, that'll take it back out of the trash. More often than not, I just hit Command Delete to delete a file. You can also delete files by right-clicking on the item and say move to bin or move to trash, depending what localization you have. Now, this doesn't mean that those files are gone. They're not off the system yet. You'll notice that the trash changes the look and feel. So if I open that up, I'll see that I have my app crash sample. Then I can drag that back out. Or I can choose to empty the bin. In fact, what I'm going to do is swap this one for this QBF text. And we'll empty the trash. It's going to give me a warning because we saw in the settings that I chose not to worry about the warning. And now that file is gone, my Quick Brown Fox text file. Now there's a couple of other differences you'll notice with the Mac when it comes to renaming files. So when I'm in the file system here and I want to rename, for example, this app crash sample file, just to rename it, all I have to do is hit the Enter key and it'll select everything but the file extension. So maybe that's from May 2024, just to give it a bit more context, and I hit return to save that file name. You'll note that when I rename it, it doesn't copy that file, it just renames it. So if I were working on app crash sample May 2024, if I have it open here, and I were to change the name, actually, you know what, it wasn't May 2024, I'm actually going to get rid of that. You'll note that it gets renamed in the app as well, that it has it open. So it's not like I have two copies of that lying around. Now I can also rename it from the app itself. So if I just tap on the name in the toolbar, I can go and say, actually, it was June 2024. You see I've renamed it in the file system and here in the app. I've not created a copy again. So it's just an important thing to note, that when I'm renaming it, if I start working on this, it's my one and only copy. I know that catches a few people out when they come over from Windows where they expect a copy to have been made, so they have their old changes in the other file. So if you want to make sure that you have that behavior, that you don't overwrite the file, I can go back to the Finder here, and I'm going to go to the Action menu. This is the same as if I clicked with the right click. I'm going to choose Get Info, and I'm going to make this a stationary pad. So what this is going to do is when I open this up, it's actually going to create a copy for me. So that is behaving like that copy behavior. So it acts as a template that I can use again and again. I probably don't want my crash sample as a template again and again. But that makes sure that I've got that one pristine copy that won't change. The other thing I can do in that Get Info window over here is I can also check the locked checkbox. So if I do have that file open, I can't overwrite it. I can choose to duplicate it or unlock it, but it makes me think twice at least before making any changes to my file. So if you're working that way and you're afraid of making changes and overwriting things, I know that's the worst when you think you have a copy saved and then it turns out you don't. You can take advantage of that get info and either lock a file or turn it into a stationary pad, and then it becomes effectively a template for your work. So that's one way to rename things in the Finder. I'm going to show you another even more powerful way in just a second. But one of the other things that we do often in the Finder is I'll be looking through files here. You can see we've got quite a few text files, PDFs, Keynote files, you name it. If I hit the space bar, it'll bring up Quick Look. So that's going to behave a little bit differently for different types of files. This one is a PDF, so I can see the thumbnails of all the pages. And I can click through. Now, if I hit the down arrow, it's going to navigate in the Finder behind this window. It's not because I tapped on the pages, but if I tap back on the main page, it'll go to the next file, my app crash sample, the other copy of it. It'll open up the Keynote file. Now, this isn't opening up the actual app. This is just giving me an insight into what is on disk. So if I want to use it, you'll see over here, I've got buttons that'll open it up in the app that it's meant to be opened in. So it's something I use all the time. If you want to isolate things, now I don't use this one as often. If you hold down the Option key when you hit space, it brings it into a full screen Quick Look. I like Quick Look just because it's simply a really fast way to get an insight into, what was in that file, which version of that file is it? Can I tell very quickly? So to get around the Finder, in fact, I'm going to hide everything else just so we can focus on just the Finder here. I'm going to get rid of my recents. So to get around quickly, we use the arrows, as I mentioned. We can also do things like hold down the Command key and click on the folder name at the top of the window, and that's a way to navigate quickly around the file system. We have the sidebar over here. We can navigate by tags. There's a tags option in the Finder as well that you can take advantage of. And one of my favorite ways of getting around, because I do come from a Unix background, if I hold Command-Shift-G, it'll bring down a kind of path navigator. So you can see here I've got /system chosen already. But imagine I'm in my home directory, so I can use autocomplete. If I hit tab, it'll autocomplete for me. I don't think I have any other folders in here except maybe untitled. And when I hit enter, it'll bring me to that path. This is a really handy way to get to the library as well. So even if you don't have it shown, you don't have hidden files shown, you can use, of course, the tilde to get to your home directory and go to, say, pictures really quickly. I use that Command-Shift-G all the time to get around the file system, especially, I usually know the paths that I've dropped things in, especially if I'm working on this machine. Okay, so one thing I might have to do is rename a whole bunch of files. We've all been there before. If you're from Unix, you're like, oh yeah, we've just write a script to do that. I've got a whole bunch of images here that I want to rename. Well, what I can do is if I select all of them, I just held down the Shift key. I had the first one selected and clicked on the last one here. If I choose the action menu or right click, I can go and say rename. And I can choose to replace the text. I can add text. I can set a certain format. This is a really powerful batch renaming functionality built right into the Finder. So something I would normally have to do with some kind of shell script, I can do it all myself. So I'm going to actually just replace, I won't replace text. Tell you what, we'll just add text at the end here. These are volleyball pics, so we'll just rename all of those. It gives you a little example of what to expect as well. And you can see the Finder updates a little bit later with their dash volleyball pics for all of them. Before the file extension, but after the rest of the file name. A really handy tool, saves a lot of time, especially when we're working with a lot of images or code files or something that you need to rein in quickly. It's a really handy thing to do. The other thing we have built into the Finder is a way to archive our files. So if I right click and choose to compress, that's not going to put them all into the compressed file. It'll leave them there, but it'll actually create a zip archive for me. And again, if I want to rename that, I can hit return, call this my pics, and then now I've got a zip file that I can mail around to other devices. It'll open up on, Windows machine, on a Unix machine. It's a really handy way to share files, especially files. I mentioned in the previous video, we have files like this .swiftpm file that if we right click on it, we can show package contents. And it's actually got files inside of the file. It's basically just a directory. Some apps may not understand how to deal with sending folders over, so we might have to zip them up as well. So we can do the same thing. Just click, compress, and now I've got a zipped up version of that I can send to anybody. Now, there's a couple other ways to access apps, files, folders, and I'll talk about Spotlight and Terminal in some other videos, which are probably the two most common ways I use to get around. If I'm not using Command-Shift-G in the Finder, I'm probably using Spotlight or I'm using Terminal, and we'll get to those in another video. Now, another way to get around and to organize our files is with mission control that I did talk about in a previous video. I can get to mission control by using 3 fingers and swiping up. This is where I'll use extra desktops if I'm working on a specific project. This is not creating up a new virtual machine. This is just giving me another space that's clutter-free. And mission control also lets me see very quickly what windows I have open. So mission control is another handy way to get around and just to organize files. There's also a relatively new addition called Stage Manager. So if I go open up the system settings, again, I'm going to hide the stuff in the background. Now, Stage Manager is in the desktop and dock settings. And again, if you can't remember where that is, you can even just start typing Stage Manager. And it'll show up in the search bar. Now, if I turn this on, it's going to make my desktop behave a little bit differently. And I can have a couple settings I can change there. So I can show recent apps. So even apps that I've just quit. And I have the option to either show all the windows at once from an application. So I focus on, say, text edit. So if I bring that one forward, and I'll unhide preview, and I'll unhide Xcode, and all the rest. We can see with Stage Manager, I'll be focused on one window at a time. So now I'm focused on the system settings. I can go over here and select my text edit documents. I can go pick my VS Code or Xcode. So Stage Manager is another way of organizing our files and just how it all looks on our desktop. I personally don't use it all that often. I think it's an interesting concept and I want to use it, but I find that I'm kind of stuck in my way. So I tend to not use Stage Manager, but it is an interesting way to keep your desktop relatively clutter-free. The last thing I'm going to show you about the Finder and just getting around to all our files, we'll talk about, like I said, the Terminal in other episodes. We'll talk about Spotlight, which is a huge way to get around. The last thing I'm going to show you is sharing this stuff. we have a handy built-in way of sharing with other machines called AirDrop. It's in the sidebar here. And this is where I can set it up to allow me to be discovered by no one, by contacts only, or by everyone. I wouldn't recommend everyone, because then you do all sorts of stuff drop to you, especially if you're traveling. But this will show you that actually I've got another laptop here that I can go drop files to. And I can also now receive them. So if I needed someone to take a look at this crash sample, I could go grab this. So if I click on the icon there, I can drag that out and drop it to my other machine. Right now it says waiting until I accept. And I just sent that crash sample over to my other machine. You can do that with iPhones in the area, iPads, and you name it. It's a really handy way to be able to share files very quickly. So that's a quick look around the Finder and how we get around the file system. AirDrop is a little bit different than the rest of the Finder, but you can see we've got our applications here. And I can navigate around again with this path bar. I get a bit of info there as well. And you can even see I've got other options like iCloud Drive, other shared things. I can install Dropbox or Box, so I can access them from the sidebar as well. So it's really easy to share files with others through the Finder. In fact, if you hit Command K, you can connect to servers, which includes FTP servers, SMB servers, and loads more. So there's a lot to get around with in the Finder. It is the way we access all of our files. Of course, I'll be talking about that a little bit more when we talk about the terminal, when we talk about shortcuts even, and I definitely dive a little bit deeper into Spotlight. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how to make the Mac feel like home and bring some elements that you might really love from your other environments. And we'll talk about some of the safety and security features of the Mac as well. So see you in the next video.